Hi, I'm Ernie Conover. Welcome to my shop. This is my second video on various aspects of my introduction of a shaper origin to my workflow. I've been tasked with making the top rail for a Swedish loom made by the Glomokra Corporation. This is for what's called a beater bar. It holds a comb-like device that pulls the threads in tight after the weaver throws a shuttle through the warp. This one is the original one from a 120 centimeter loom, which is about 47 inches. It'll weave 47 inches wide. And it has a twist in it so that the actual working part of the loom ends up cockamamie to the loom itself. So I'm making a new one. It's a perfect job for origin because we have to chop two mortises at each end that go all the way through this rail and accept two downward stiles that support the rest of the mechanism. Beside it are two 25 millimeter deep by 10 millimeter wide mortises that this piece goes into, and that causes this whole thing to go on a rack at the top of the loom and pivot like that. Since I'm in Ohio and pine is not easily obtainable, I got a nice piece of hard maple, which is wonderful wood. And this layout is what you would call a palindrome. A palindrome is any word or piece of music that you can either write or play backwards or forwards, and it's the same. So if you bifurcate this in the middle, these are mirror layouts, and they lend themselves well to any of the SVG layout programs. My go-to is SketchUp. So it's easy to simply draw half of that mirror image and you'd have your layout. I actually did this in the machine. It was about as easy to do it that way. A nice thing about origin is that working in either imperial or metric is no big deal. When you first start up the machine, you just go to the home screen and you can change from imperial to millimeters with a touch of a finger. I started by cutting the workpiece out from this piece of lumber. I then took the outrip and put shaper tape on it, took some scrap pieces out of my scrap bin and planed these all to the same thickness and double side taped them on each side. And now this gives me a working area at each end and connects this whole thing up, and shaper can keep track of all this. After laying the piece out in pencil, I then scanned in my tape, and by doing a thorough scan, you then have your layout marks in that scan and can see them on the wood here as you move it around. There's the center line. Here are the two mortises right here. I started by laying out this 16 millimeter wide by 68 millimeter long mortise on the other end of this piece. And then I laid out the 10 millimeter by 29 millimeter mortise next to it. And then I placed the bigger mortise by simply adding 1,385 millimeters to its place on the y-axis. I did a like thing with the smaller mortise. That was it. I was laid out. It took all of 5 minutes. And because I did a careful layout job to start with, I got my placement just right. I might also add that when I set up my grid, I set it to a 5 millimeter increment and touched with the engraving bit upside down and touch twice on the front of this and once on the other end. And that gave me a grid in perfect alignment with the piece. I then turned that engraving bit around and set it to a 0.5 millimeter depth and traced out all of my mortises cutting on the line. And this allowed me to see clearly that I was in the right place. And when I now square out these corners with chisels, I have a place to set my chisel that'll make this work very easy. The rest of this was pretty much straight origin work. With auto pass, I cut to a depth of 26 millimeters on this side, and I was halfway through for these big mortises. For the smaller mortise, I cut to a depth of 25 millimeters, and I don't do anything on the other side. I secured this piece with a tape on it and these two pieces that are double-sided tape to the piece above to my bench dogs with two clamps. This allows me to move this around, take it in and out, check it, and quickly put it back. And to go the other way, because this is a palindrome, I simply put this right here like this, tighten my bench vise, and bingo. I cut through to 26 millimeters from the other side, and I'm done. To square these pieces out, I can use a straight 10 millimeter mortise chisel for this side, and again, I can set it right in that little line that I carved with the origin to start with, and just walk that down straight halfway, do the same thing over there, and I'll have a perfect mortise. For this one, I don't happen to have an 18 millimeter mortise chisel, so I just have to use a bench chisel the same way, like this, and cut down through there and go halfway. When I actually do this job, I'll actually take these two blocks, put them down, clamp this to it, and cut into that sacrificial block. Then I will go over to my shaper and round all the edges of this to make it look like the original. I've set my Felder table saw shaper combination machine, KF500, with a roundover bit in it. I have a router bit spindle for it, as well as a standard shaper spindle. And I'll now round all the corners on this and make it look pretty much like the original. You start by doing what are called coping cuts first, which is end grain cuts. And the nice thing about this machine is this sliding table is always dead parallel to this shaper head. And this will allow me to easily round over everything. Now that I have the coping cuts made, I'll make sticking cuts with the grain here. And I have this device which will keep everything hard against the fence. And there we have a new top rail for a Glamocra 120 loom, sans twist in it. Thanks for visiting my shop. Please visit again soon.